Welcome in, everybody, to a deep dive into probably one of the biggest names you've ever heard of.
Oh, yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci.
Big and
Huge.
big guy.
We've got excerpts from biographies, art history analyses. We even took a peek into his Wikipedia entry, all to try to figure out how this guy became more than just an artist, but a true Renaissance man.
That's right. And I think what we're going to find is that it's the way his curiosity just bridged the gaps between art, science, and invention that made him so iconic.
Well, so he's born in 1452 in Vinci, Italy.
Okay.
Not the most creative name, but it gets the point across.
Right.
Now, what's interesting is that he was born out of wedlock.
Oh.
His father was a notary, and his mother was from humbler beginnings.
Right.
So do you think this less traditional upbringing had any impact on him?
It very well could have, if you think about it. Young Leonardo absorbing all this knowledge, maybe outside of a conventional schooling system, that could have easily fueled his independent thinking and drive to explore beyond what was considered the norm.
Like a Renaissance origin story, right?
Yeah. Speaking of stories, his artistic training is amazing. He's apprenticed to Verrocchio's workshop in Florence.
Wow!
Alongside other huge names like Botticelli and Perugino.
And you have to remember, this is Florence we're talking about, which at the time was like the center of the art world, just a hotbed of innovation.
So he's surrounded by the best.
Absolutely. So these masters, they were pushing the boundaries of perspective, realism, composition. When you think about Donatello and Masaccio Ghiberti, their work was all around him.
Yeah, it's like being thrown into the deep end of the Renaissance pool, right?
Yeah.
Now there's that almost legendary story about Leonardo painting an angel in Verrocchio's Baptism of Christ.
Cool.
So the story goes that Leonardo painted it so well that his master basically said, "I'm out, can't top that."
Wow.
It's probably a bit exaggerated.
Probably.
But it really highlights how his talent was recognized early on.
Definitely. I mean, by the 1490s, he was already being called divine.
Oh, wow.
Which, when you look at his work from that time, you can totally see why.
He wasn't just imitating the masters, he was innovating.
So what was he doing differently?
Well, one of the things the sources talk about is his use of subtle gradation of tone, and that's really key to understanding the smoky sfumato effect you see in the Mona Lisa.
Ah, sfumato. So that's what gives her that mysterious aura, right?
Exactly. It creates a sense of depth and ambiguity.
Yeah.
And it's not just a cool artistic trick either.
Huh.
It's directly connected to Leonardo's scientific curiosity about light and shadow, how they interact and create form.
So it wasn't just about making pretty pictures. It was about understanding the essence of how we see the world.
Precisely. And that drive to understand the world wasn't limited to just art. I mean, Leonardo's notebooks reveal a mind that was just obsessed with unraveling the mysteries of nature itself.
How many notebooks are we talking about?
Over 13,000 pages worth. And they weren't just random scribbles either. These were meticulously organized, filled with detailed drawings, diagrams, observations on anatomy, engineering, botany, optics, geology, you name it. He was studying it.
It's mind-boggling. It's almost like his brain was wired differently. You know, constantly observing and analyzing everything around him.
I think that's a great way to put it, and it makes him a very different kind of scientist than those who came later.
Oh, how so?
Well, he wasn't just focused on experiments and data. He was also using observation, intuition, and artistic expression as part of his process.
Fascinating. And this brings us to his fascination with the human body. He went way beyond what artists typically did. He was dissecting corpses.
Yeah.
To understand the mechanics beneath the skin.
Which was pretty groundbreaking for the time. And those anatomical studies, they weren't just for scientific curiosity.
Yeah.
They directly informed his art, allowing him to depict movement and emotion with this incredible accuracy.
It's like a direct connection between the science and the art.
Exactly. For example, there's this drawing where he's studying the muscles of a hand.
Okay.
And right next to it are sketches for hands in various paintings, so you can see how one informed the other.
So the scientific understanding fed directly into the artistic representation.
Absolutely.
That's incredible. Do you think that level of detail, that almost obsession with accuracy, is that what sets Leonardo apart from the other artists of his time?
It's certainly a major factor. I mean, his artistic eye informed his scientific investigations, and his scientific investigations informed his art. He was seeing patterns and connections that others might have missed, and then he was able to bring those insights to life in his drawings in a way that words alone just couldn't.
It's like he was seeing the world on a different level, with an almost superhuman perception.
Yeah.
And yet when you look at his work, you also sense this very human element.
Oh, absolutely.
This deep understanding of emotion and the complexities of the human experience.
He wasn't just a detached observer. He was deeply engaged with the world around him.
Right.
Both intellectually and emotionally. And that comes across in his art. And that's what makes it timeless and universally relatable.
Okay, so we can't talk about Da Vinci without diving into the masterpiece.
Of course not.
And honestly, where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with the Mona Lisa. Perhaps the most famous painting in the world.
All right.
Everyone knows that enigmatic smile, but it's worth noting that the lack of ornamentation was deliberate choice.
Really?
To focus our attention on her gaze and hands.
So he's using composition to guide the viewer's eye.
Exactly.
Leading us right where he wants us to look. That's pretty clever.
It is, and it goes even deeper than that. Even the landscape in the background seems to be in flux, adding to the painting's mystique.
Yeah.
It's a portrait that just transcends time. It still captivates us centuries later.
And what about The Last Supper?
Ah, The Last Supper.
That's a story of both artistic triumph and struggle, right?
Absolutely. It's said that Da Vinci agonized over capturing the expressions of Christ, and Judas wanting to convey the weight of betrayal and sacrifice just through his brushstrokes.
Didn't he joke about using the prior of the convent as a model for Judas because the prior was constantly nagging him?
There is a story about that, yes, but we should probably take it with a grain of salt.
Sure, but it would be a pretty funny anecdote if it were true. It shows that even a genius like Leonardo had to deal with annoying people.
Indeed, it humanizes him, doesn't it?
It does.
And speaking of humanizing, his fascination with faces and how they reveal emotions that led him to study anatomy in ways that no artist had before. He wasn't just interested in the surface, he wanted to understand the mechanics beneath.
And that's where those incredible anatomical drawings come in.
Precisely.
They're not just scientifically accurate, they're works of art in themselves.
Absolutely. They're both beautiful and groundbreaking. He was really pushing boundaries, even if it meant going against the norms of the time. Remember, dissecting human bodies was pretty taboo back then.
But Leonardo wasn't afraid to break the rules in the pursuit of knowledge.
Exactly. He wasn't just an artist. He was a scientist, an engineer, an inventor, and those roles were constantly feeding into each other.
Yeah.
Fueling his creativity, leading to some truly remarkable achievements.
So it wasn't just about talent. It was about this incredible drive to understand, to explore.
To push the limit.
To push the limits of what's possible. And speaking of pushing limits, let's talk about those notebooks again.
Oh, yeah.
What kinds of things was he exploring in those pages? Was it all anatomy and engineering, or was there something else going on there?
That's a great question and a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive, because those notebooks reveal a mind not only obsessed with how things work, but also with imagining how things could work.
So we're talking about Leonardo the inventor.
Exactly.
Now this is where it gets really interesting.
Absolutely. Hold on to your hats because we're about to step into the world of Leonardo da Vinci, the visionary.
So we left off talking about Leonardo's notebooks and how they reveal so much about his mind.
Absolutely. A mind that was obsessed with how things work,
right?
But also with how things could work.
So these notebooks are almost like a window into the future.
You could say that.
Filled with designs for inventions that wouldn't even be possible for centuries.
Yeah.
So let's get specific. What kind of inventions are we talking about?
Well, for starters, Leonardo was absolutely fascinated by flight. He studied birds meticulously, analyzing their wing structure, how they generate lift. And those observations led him to design several flying machines, including one that looks remarkably like a modern-day helicopter.
Wait, a helicopter in the 15th century?
I know, it's crazy, right?
It's nuts.
And he even came up with a design for a parachute.
Wow.
Envisioning a way for humans to safely descend from great heights.
I'm starting to think this guy was actually from the future, sent back in time to drop these incredible ideas. But seriously, did any of his flying machines actually work?
Well, not in his lifetime. But get this. In 2003, a documentary team actually built and tested some of his designs.
No way.
And they were surprised to find that some of them were actually quite aerodynamically sound.
So his ideas were actually grounded in some scientific principles.
Oh, absolutely. He wasn't just doodling fantasy machines. He was combining observation, intuition, and engineering principles to come up with some truly innovative concepts.
So it wasn't just flight. What else?
His inventive spirit wasn't limited to just flight. He designed war machines, bridges, canals.
Wow.
Even a self-propelled cart, essentially a precursor to the modern automobile.
Hold on. A car? That's insane. What did it look like? Did it have a steering wheel?
Well, it didn't have a steering wheel as we know it, but it did have a system of gears and levers that allowed for basic maneuverability.
So you could actually steer it.
And it was powered by springs, which would have given it a limited range, but still.
A self-propelled vehicle in the 1400s?
Yeah.
Pretty mind-blowing.
It really is. And it makes you wonder what he could have accomplished if he had access to, the materials and technology that we have today.
It's a tantalizing thought.
It is. But even without those resources, he was still able to conceive of ideas that were centuries ahead of their time. And that's, I think, what really makes him such a visionary figure.
Okay, so we've got flying machines, cars. You mentioned war machines. What was that about? Was he designing weapons?
He did, yes. And it's important to remember that Leonardo lived in a time of constant conflict and political upheaval. So it's not surprising that he was commissioned to design military equipment.
Right.
His notebooks contain sketches for tanks, giant crossbows, even a steam cannon.
A steam cannon sounds kind of dangerous.
He even came up with a design for a multi-barreled gun that could be fired in rapid succession.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that Leonardo wasn't just an artist or a scientist.
Yeah.
He was also a product of his time.
Right. So his inventions reflected the realities of the world he lived in.
Yeah.
But they also show this incredible capacity for problem solving and innovation. That's like he was constantly looking for ways to improve things to make them more efficient, more effective.
Precisely. And that drive to improve things wasn't limited to practical inventions.
Oh.
It extended to his art as well. For example, he was constantly experimenting with new techniques and materials, pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible in painting.
Which makes sense. And it brings us back to that concept of sumato that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a stylistic choice.
Right.
It was a way to create a more realistic, more nuanced representation of the world. He was literally blurring the lines between art and science.
Exactly. And that fusion of art and science is perhaps what best defines Leonardo as a true Renaissance man.
Yeah.
He saw no separation between those disciplines.
Right.
They were all part of the same grand pursuit of knowledge and understanding.
And that pursuit led him to some pretty dark places, too.
Yeah.
Didn't he do some pretty gruesome anatomical dissections?
He did. His notebooks contain detailed drawings of dissected human bodies.
Really?
Including some very graphic depictions of internal organs and musculature.
Okay, that's a bit much for me. I think I'm going to stick to admiring the Mona Lisa from afar. Thank you very much. But seriously, what drove him to that level of, morbid curiosity?
I think it was that same insatiable desire to understand how things work, to see beneath the surface, to reveal the hidden complexities of the human body.
I guess you have to admit, those drawings are incredible, even if they are a bit creepy. He captured the details with such precision. It's like looking at actual photographs.
Absolutely. They're a testament to his artistic skill as much as his scientific curiosity.
So we've got flying machines, cars, war machines, anatomical dissections. It seems like there was no limit to Leonardo's curiosity and inventiveness.
It does, doesn't it? And yet, despite all of his achievements, he still felt a sense of unfulfillment.
What do you mean? How could someone who accomplished so much still feel unfulfilled?
That's a question we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive as we delve into Leonardo's legacy and what his life can teach us about the pursuit of knowledge, creativity, and the meaning of true genius.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Let's get to it. Okay, so we just left off talking about how Leonardo, despite all of his success, still felt a sense of unfulfillment.
Right, which might seem kind of strange when you think about it. I mean, this is Leonardo da Vinci we're talking about.
Yeah, the guy who gave us the Mona Lisa, The Last Supper, so many iconic works.
Exactly, and yet there's this quote from Giorgio Vasari, who was a contemporary of Leonardo's.
Okay.
He wrote, Leonardo failing to finish many things he had begun.
Wait, hold on. Failing to finish. But how can you say that about the guy who painted the Mona Lisa?
Well, it really speaks to just the depth of his ambition and maybe even a bit of self-critique.
Yeah.
Perhaps for Leonardo, it wasn't about the number of finished works. Yeah. It was about that constant pursuit of knowledge.
So even a genius like Leonardo felt the pressure to do more.
It seems that way.
To learn more.
It makes you wonder if that feeling ever really goes away, even when you've accomplished so much.
It's a good question, and it leads us to this really interesting paradox. Leonardo seen as both a superhuman figure and a relatable one.
Absolutely. We marvel at his genius.
Right.
Yet we also see these glimpses of his struggles, his doubts, his humanity.
It makes his story even more compelling, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just about the achievements.
Right.
It's about the journey.
The struggles. The constant striving for something more.
And speaking of striving for something more, modern research is still trying to piece together the puzzle of Leonardo da Vinci.
It's true, there are these ongoing efforts to analyze his DNA,
Oh, wow.
searching for the exact location of his remains.
So even now, centuries after his death, we're still trying to understand him better.
You mentioned his legacy. What do you think Leonardo's ultimate legacy is? Is it the art, the inventions, or something more?
Well, I think it's all of that, of course, but perhaps his greatest gift to us is his insatiable curiosity, his unwavering belief in the power of the human mind.
Yeah.
To explore, to discover, to create. He showed us that the boundaries of what's possible are constantly being redefined.
It's so inspiring. It makes you want to go out and learn something new, experiment with something you've never tried before, maybe dust off that old sketchbook you have lying around.
Exactly. And remember, as Leonardo himself once said, learning never exhausts the mind. Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the mind of Leonardo da Vinci.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. It's been a journey through art, science, invention, and really the boundless potential of human curiosity.
I hope you've gained a new appreciation for this extraordinary figure and that you're leaving with a renewed sense of wonder and inspiration.
I know I am, and who knows, maybe this deep dive will spark a new discovery, a new invention, or even just a new way of looking at the world. After all, as Leonardo taught us, the journey of learning never ends.